Hello everyone and welcome to TPS training. This is the introduction to TPS and I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Lewis Weber with Behavior Care. As we open up the TPS file, depending on which tab, and of course these are the tabs below here, which tab was active when the file was saved, you might be showing one of these other tabs. And of course you just click on them to go to them. But for this training we're going to start on setup, and I want to point out these areas and what they do so that you understand them. Everything in TPS of course has a purpose. When we look at the overlay of boxes here, we see we can put in up to 10 academic blocks. Obviously if you're a teacher with students and interventions that you're monitoring, you'd put your name there. This section right here we're going to skip for right now, and we're going to also skip all this to the right because it is used for classroom management, and that's for another time. The p-value and the maximum rating are important to set. Now the default setup is a 3 for both of these. The p-value, and I'll show you that later on, the p-value is used to enter data automatically, and so that value is the number, or that number is the number that's going to be entered for all of the increasing targets, and you'll get to see that in a second. Simply by entering a P, it'll put a 3 in all of the available increasing target cells, and it will put a 0 in all of the available decreasing target cells, and I'll show you that in a little bit. The maximum rating is important to understand, is the kind of rating system that you're going to use. Now in some cases you may be doing a 0 or 1 rating. That means 0, the student didn't exhibit the behavior, and a 1 means the student did exhibit the behavior. That's very handy and very efficient for recording data for lots of students. The problem with 0s and 1s is that you don't have the ability to show intensity. That's where the 3 or 4 comes in. Let me explain that very quickly to say, if we're using a rating of 3, which would be a maximum rating in this case, it would be 0 is that the student didn't show the behavior. A 1 is a low amount or frequency or intensity of behavior. All those words would apply or could apply. A 2 is a medium amount, and a 3 is a high amount of that behavior. So think of it as a rating scale. It just tells us the amount of something. It doesn't tell us what it is. So the same kind of rating scale would be used for increasing and decreasing. A rating of 3 would be a lot of an increasing target. A rating of 3 for a decreasing target would mean a lot of some inappropriate behavior perhaps. So think of 3 as a scale, not as a good or a bad. What we do want to see is more 3s for increasing targets like completes work or quality of work or independence or social skills. And we would like to see 0s, of course, for our decreasing targets like aggression or out of area. So the maximum rating establishes the largest number that you could use in your rating. Now sometimes you'll go to a rating system of 4. And you would just of course type in a 4. That would be a low is 1, well of course 0, but low is 1, 2 is medium, 3 is high, and 4 would be extreme or extraordinary. We use the extraordinary word for the increasing target, but extreme for the decreasing target, just because there isn't a good word for both. That means that you have a little bit more range on the high end of your ratings. That's for special needs situations. For the most part though, we're going to put either a 1 there or a 3, and I would say of those two numbers, the 3 is probably the most popular. That's why it's the one that shows up when you open TPS. Okay, you can see we have listed increasing target behaviors and decreasing target behaviors. These are the target behaviors that you would assign if every one of the students in your TPS file, and you can have up to 12 of them. These would be used if you're going to have them all be the same. And the reason why I have it here on setup is so that if you do type anything here, it's going to be applied to all 12 students, and it just saves you time. But we're not going to do that here. What we are going to do though is go back to our academic blocks. We're going to enter academic blocks for all the students in your classroom. This will be, let's say, a classroom where we have uh, oh, maybe 5 or 6 or even 10 students. They're all doing the same thing for the most part all day long. It's a self-contained classroom. Now we would just type in those words. So it might be arrival, and it might be ELA. Let me fix that. ELA, and maybe we'll do math, and I'm just going to make some things up here. We're going to do lunch next, and we're going to do specials. Let's get rid of that capital P. And let's say we have another math block, so we'll call that math 2, and then we have dismissal. Okay, so there we go. So we've used 7 of the academic blocks, and we'll leave these others blank. By entering them here on setup, that's going to assign them to all of the students in the TPS file. Okay, and let's see, I'm going to put my name here, Mr. Weber, and we're just going to leave this blank for the moment, and we're going to ignore all of this stuff right here. Okay, now let's click over to setup, and here you can see we have student slots, as we call them, and this goes up to 12 students. And let's put a student's name in here. We'll say Pete Moss, and let's do an increasing target behavior of work completion. And let's also say we're going to have social skills, some kind of demonstration of social skills. And for the decreasing target, let's put physical aggression to property. Now I have to abbreviate it somewhere along the line because we want to keep it within this area. If I were to continue to type, it would start to spill over onto the sides, but it's not going to fit into a lot of the other things that is expecting just this number of characters. So try to keep it brief. You can describe these things in all the detail you want somewhere else, like in a Word document, especially if you wanted to establish rubrics for these things. For example, what is a 1 of physical aggression? What is a level 2 of physical aggression? What is a level 3 of physical aggression? You want to be able to explain those to well, everyone who is going to be looking at the student's file. Okay, those rubrics are very important. What is a level 1 in social skills, and so forth, and the same for work completion. That's probably the easiest one, because if you complete, let's say our student completes 90% of the work or 80% of the work, whatever you choose, then we would give them a 3. And so it's easy to establish it on a percentage basis. But some of these others, such as social skills, you have to list them in more detail. What is a level 3? What does it look like? And it's important because we need to know that somewhere along the line. We need to have defined that. And then if we were to do another student, let's see, let's do coriander, and maybe we're looking at work independence. And maybe we're looking at verbal aggression. Now notice that I'm not filling all of these 4 increasing and 4 decreasing targets right out of the gate here, because I want to have some room to add in some other behaviors as time goes on. I like 2 increasing and 2 decreasing. One thing I want to mention to avoid is having something like that are opposites, like on task, off task. The problem with that is, as they're opposites, and because they can't do it at the same time, there's a duplication of effort. If I know on task, then I know off task, because it's just the opposite. So if a student got a 1 for on task, then I know they were off task a considerable amount of time. I can tell that from the 1. So what we try to do is make these be fairly independent. These are the skills that we want to be teaching. These are the things we want the student to do less of. The problem that we run into a lot is sometimes teachers want to make these opposites. So if we want verbal aggression to be low, we do want social skills to increase, but we wouldn't necessarily want to measure both of them. And so increasingly what we try to do is take the verbal aggression away and put social skills up here. But I wanted to give another example of decreasing targets. So if you wanted to leave it there, that would be fine, but I wanted to make that point, that think about what we can do for increasing targets. That's important for lots of reasons. One is you want to be reinforcing those behaviors, and two, it's a better IEP goal to say we're teaching the student, let's say, social skills. Okay, we can also do, let's say one more example. Let's see, just in case, and maybe we're going to do problem-solving skills. That brings up an interesting kind of, well, problem. The problem with problem-solving skills is, what if there's no problem? Well, we're going to take a look at that, and I'll answer that question briefly right now to say, if there's no problem, then we're just going to leave it blank. So only when a problem comes up might we be measuring the problem-solving skills. So that's another opportunity to show how TPS can handle for a variety of data collection needs. Problem-solving skills are only used when there are problems. If there are no problems, then we leave that cell blank because the situation didn't occur. In fact, let's just leave it that way as problem-solving skills, and we don't even have a decreasing target. Okay, so you get the idea. You'll go through and enter them as they are listed in your behavior intervention plans, ideally, and then those are, of course, linked to IEP goals, and it'll be these data that will be your accountability that the IEP goal has been met. All right, so that's setup. Now let's go over to data entry. That, of course, is where you'll be spending most of your time, well, entering your data. Of course, that's why it's called that. So let's click on that and see what it looks like. All right, let me show you the layout of this for right now. We have Pete Moss, we have Corey Ander, and as I scroll down, you can see that there is this repeating block, and I call it a data entry grid because it is where all the data entry will be done, but you'll see it repeats every day. Now, I know every school day. Of course, we all do. It's in the school board calendar. So given that I already know information, I don't want you to have to enter it. So all the school days are already entered for you. And every year, a new version of TPS comes out with new school dates. So you never have to enter a date in TPS, or at least not in this situation. Let's scroll back up to the top. Now you'll note that we also have the academic blocks listed here, and they're repeated here. And the reason why they're the same is because on setup we entered them here. On the setup tab, that establishes as a default for all the students, so that when you go to data entry, you can see I've established my academic blocks automatically for Pete and for Corey, and if I go to the right, for Justin, and as I go to the right, for the next student that I would enter. Now there's no name up here yet because I haven't entered them, but because I had entered them as a default academic block, they are listed, so you don't have to keep typing them. Now you're probably thinking, well, what if the schedule has changed? If it changes before the beginning of the year or on the first day of school, for example, so maybe instead of math we might say social skills training. If I have an academic block that's different than the default that I entered on setup, I go to the first day of school and I enter it, and then when I hit enter, it changes it for the rest of the school year. And that's a real nice thing to be able to do. So you can customize each of your students where they are different from the default that you entered on setup. Okay. A little bit more about the data entry grid, and then we'll finish up this portion of the training. You can see that you've got two increasing targets and one increasing target. And here we had one increasing target and one decreasing target. And you can see what TPS does now, and this is new for this year, is it puts in the X's where no target behavior is listed or where no academic blocks are listed. And so this saves you the trouble of having to enter these X's by yourself. Now, let me show you how to enter some data. All right. When we go back to setup, you'll see it here. It says, what is the p-value? Let me demonstrate that for you right now. Each data entry grid for each student every day has a yellow box right there in the middle, and you can see it's right in the middle of Corey's as well. If you click on that and enter a P, and it could be a capital or lowercase, it doesn't matter. When you hit enter, what that's going to do is it's going to put all threes on the left, because when we go to setup, we had put that as our p-value, and it puts all zeros on the right. So we'll call it a perfect day. That's why it's a P. P for perfect day. All threes and all zeros. Well, that's great, you might think, but what if the student wasn't perfect for the day? Well, what you can then do is go back and just change the ones in which the student wasn't perfect. Let's say during lunch there were some problems with social skills, maybe a low amount of social skills, and maybe there was also some physical aggression to property. And then maybe during dismissal there was also some physical aggression, and maybe the work wasn't completed. Maybe Pete didn't do any work at all and gets a 0. So I would enter only those values that deviate from perfection. Now, some people like to do it in the different sequence. What I mean by that is some like to say, okay, during specials, work completion was low. During ELA, we had some problems with social skills, and maybe there was some physical aggression during lunch. And then to go back and enter the P, and it fills in all of the other values where the student was perfect, so you don't have to enter them. Now that's a great advantage, and it becomes an even greater advantage as you have more academic, more increasing and decreasing targets and more academic blocks. Now if you had all 10 of these academic blocks filled and all 4 increasing and all 4 decreasing targets, that would be 80 data entry keystrokes you'd have to make for each student. But of course, if the student was close to having a very good day or perfect day, you enter a P, then you just enter the values in which the student was not perfect. And that is a huge saving, because most students are generally pretty good. When they have problems, it's during only a certain portion of the day. That's my experience. And this allows us to take advantage of that. One more thing and we'll be done. Here you can write notes. So let's say on arrival, a student came in, or in this case it would be Pete. Pete was very happy. Now that's not so important to write, but that was the first thing that came to mind. So Pete was very happy. Or maybe over here we can say another student taunted Pete, and he was retaliating for that with some physical aggression to property. Whatever the case may be, you can put your notes, and what that will do, and we'll show that on another segment, is that gets linked to the academic block. One more thing, I keep saying that, but this will be the last item. When the student is absent, you don't need to do anything but just type the word, and TPS will know to just ignore all of this, because it only looks at numbers. So if there's no numbers entered, TPS assumes that the student was absent, and that's all you have to write. If the student comes late, you can say came late, and then just start collecting data where you normally would. Okay, if you happen to enter the P, let's make that a 1. If you happen to enter a P, it's going to fill in these cells because it doesn't know that the student came late. That doesn't tell TPS what to do. So what you would do, if there was no data for the first 2, you would just highlight it and delete it. Leave your X's where they are, and that's how you would handle that. Okay, at the end of the day, be sure to save your file. That little icon, which is probably on your screen too, will save it, or you can go File and save. Okay, so let's review. Setup is where you put things, information that's going to be global for the whole TPS file. In this example, we used the global academic blocks because most students in the class were going to have those academic blocks. But because each student had a unique intervention, we left these areas blank, which would also be default for everyone. We're going to use a p-value of 3, that's for the perfect day, and a maximum rating of 3. That means you're going to do a low, medium, or high rating system. And then we went to setup and establish some student names and increasing and decreasing targets. And then we went to setup and we enter some data, and that's all you have to do to get started. Well, I was hoping to keep it to about 15 minutes, and according to my little clock on the bottom, it's 20 minutes. I guess that's just what it takes to go over the introduction to TPS. Thanks for your attention, and I hope you're able to be up and running quickly to be able to collect data for your students' intervention needs. Again, Lewis Weber with Behavior Care. Thank you very much.